All right, nice. Good morning, welcome. My name is Steve, and thank you for being here today. This is the fourth event we've had on in Manchester. We've done ones on demand gen, B2B marketing in general, but this has definitely been the most popular one we've had so far. So maybe the panelists, or finally we've got enough people knowing about it. But yeah, it's so hello to the new people and welcome. Why do we put on these events? So the aim has always been with bite-sized B2B marketing, just easy to digest tips to help B2B companies optimize and improve their marketing efforts. So that's the aim with these events and all the future events. So we try and do it on different topics that are important to marketers, be they in-house, agency side, freelancers and whatnot. So if you do have a topic that you want us to do next time or anything that you think is a good thing for us to cover, then please let us know. We're always open to ideas. Or if you've got people that you want to be on the panel or yourself being on the panel as well, just let me know, because it is an absolute pain in the ass to try and find people for the panels. So yeah, that will help me out quite a lot. So I just want to say a big thank you as well to the workspace, so Bonded Warehouse. So they've been great to us, and I can't recommend them enough in terms of, say, meeting rooms or private desks, hot desks, and things like that. So I'm a member here as well. And yeah, great bunch of people, and they've helped us out so much by giving us this room as well. So if you're interested in, I believe they give a free trial day as well. If you want to come down, test the hot desk in space and whatnot and stuff like that, you can speak to Rosemary on the front desk. So why did we pick this topic? AI and automation in marketing. So yeah, it's quite a hot topic. It's one that's kind of a bit exciting at the same time as being a bit nervous, making me a bit nervous. Like, you know, is it going to take our jobs? What's going to happen in the future? As someone that runs a marketing agency, what are we going to be doing in a couple of years to kind of help our clients? So it's kind of, for me, this is a great topic as well to dive into. And yeah, we've got the great two guests here who are going to be helping us today kind of dive into that. So without further ado, we can get started with the discussion. I'll stop waffling on, but yeah, I'll let you two introduce yourselves one by one and just what you do. And I suppose just to give some context of why you're set up here, kind of how you're involved in AI or how you're using AI currently at the moment.
So I'm Beth. I'm Director of Content Marketing at Ampliance, which is an AI content company. So when I first joined the business about 3 years ago, we are essentially like an e-commerce software vendor company. So we had like a headless CMS, DAM, and then media optimization capabilities. We had a product strategy pivot about 18 months ago to AI. So that core platform is now underpinned by AI entirely. We have what we call studios, which is our AI image and AI content studios, which allows marketers and merchandising teams to generate written content, to generate visual content almost instantly. And we fine tune those models based on those kind of brand guardrails and also their kind of tone of voice and their brand preferences. So it's very, very specific. And we have a lot of like product and engineering teams who are working very carefully with each of those customers to make sure that the AI output that those customers are receiving is contextual. So I work with AI on a daily basis, both within my team and also as a result of producing the messaging for our product.
Right then. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Lee. I'm the head of digital at Peak.ai. We're an AI platform largely for retailers and manufacturers as our two main core ICP. What the AI is doing for those retailers and manufacturers is largely inventory, predictive inventory, and also pricing, markdown, that kind of stuff, and optimizing those journeys for teams within some big retailers and some big manufacturers. So yeah, my kind of story and journey through marketing and digital, I've been in digital for as long, well, too long now, but about 11 years, I think it is officially. And yeah, through a lot of my career, automation has kind of underpinned a lot of my thinking and understanding of how I want to sort of achieve things with digital and with marketing. And working for an AI company kind of really helps with us and our way of wanting to utilize AI, whether that's from a generative perspective or agentic, which is something we'll speak about a little bit later on. And we're enabled quite a lot to sort of pick up the baton and run with it almost internally, as well as what we're building externally for our customers. And it's a really exciting time. We're doing a load of really cool stuff with some really, really interesting tools, really cool people, and really sort of cutting edge AI stuff. So yeah, I think that's qualified me to talk a little bit about this. So yeah.
We're not related, by the way. A couple of people thinking, being like, looking up and being like, Lee? And I'm like, no, I'm Steve, so it's all good. So anyway, to kick it off, AI has been, hyped as a game changer. Everyone's like, it's going to change the whole marketing landscape. But what's some of the common misconceptions that companies or marketers have about AI?
I think one of the common misconceptions is that AI is going to take our jobs. I think there is still a bit of scaremongering going on within kind of social media. And I think a lot of people are fearful about what this technology means for their day-to-day responsibilities and their job security. And I think that's a really interesting one because I was actually listening to a podcast this morning, and I think there are some jobs that AI will be able to replace and they'll fully be able to automate responsibility. But I think one thing that people forget to realize is that AI output in any sense will always require human validation. There will always be a need for human refinement, and there will always be a need for that kind of QA process afterwards. I've unfortunately seen some really awful examples of content being produced and published that hasn't had that QA process when it's been AI generated, which is detrimental to performance. That's for any business. That could be B2C, that could be B2B. It's a really, really important step and best practice of using AI. So I think that is one very common misconception that I'm hoping is starting to change. I think there is more education out there. But I think until you have a workforce that is enabled on the capabilities and also the risks associated with AI, unfortunately, that there is always going to be that fear.
Yeah. Lee?
Thank you. I think from my perspective, the common misconception of that is the whole thing itself is the misconception, because you see the processes and things that can change, and you kind of see the way that the world could potentially change through using AI and things like that, and marketing as a silo of that. But actually, if you then start to believe that yourself and think, well, AI is just going to solve my life for me, then you're kind of then on a slippery slope to almost disregarding the way that things have been done in the past. You're still going to need to do all of the reports. You're still going to need to do all of the strategy, and you're still going to need to do all of the day-to-day sort of execution of your campaigns, or whether it's your, I don't know, looking in your ads platforms or doing your analytics, that kind of stuff. Like, that won't change. It's the route into which we then find efficiencies, which I think is the key part. Because, as you say, people love these big slogans around stuff like, well, it's going to change the world and it's going to change my life and I'm going to use ChatGPT to do absolutely everything for me. Definitely not me. But ultimately, it's actually, how do we then understand what we then do and where we progress that information that we're gaining and the efficiency we're gaining to apply it to real life use cases? Because otherwise, we're just going to end up in this sort of this weird cycle, like Beth was saying, in terms of you've got to check things and you've got to sort of keep an eye on what it's doing for you, because if you don't and it runs wild, then we're all going to end up in a world where AI just talks to AI over and over again. Nobody wants that, and the creativity of people and the strategizing and things comes from people and always will come from people. So yeah, I think to summarize, the misconception is that it won't change everything as drastically as people think, but it will in a way where we can sort of gain efficiency and productivity and that from it. So yeah.
It's a classic thing anyways. Like, there's the book, The E-Myth Revisited, and it's just a classic business book of like a business owner as they hire she owns a bakery, she hires an employee who's going to take over everything. They come in, the quality of the cakes goes down, everything's going wrong, and this person's just kind of running around doing stuff. And it's like, it'll be similar with AI in terms of like, you can't just bring that in to then just think it's going to take over everything and just be like this perfect thing. As you said, it's like the business of the best processes or the best kind of systems in place that can bring it in for certain bits or to help with the process and things like that. It's going to be the most beneficial. So yeah, I think that's a good point there. And I suppose going on the risks there as well, what are the potential risks of you using AI? I know there's a lot of talk like hallucinations, or where it will just kind of come up and make up, facts, figures or stuff like that. Like, are there any other common risks when using AI?
Sure.
I think there are quite a few. There are a number of steps that need to be put in place before I think you properly implement or adopt AI into a business. So one of those is obviously kind of data cleaning and making sure that you've got really high quality data that's clear of kind of errors and inconsistencies, and that will help any outputs to avoid kind of any hallucinations. Another thing is also training users of AI tools and technology in terms of delivering like very concise briefs and prompts. I think at the moment, things like ChatGPT, people can just put very kind of generic output into ChatGPT, and then they therefore get like a very generic response. There is a real kind of art to fine tuning a brief to make sure that you get very contextual output based on what exactly is that you need, like not just based on a framework, but actually kind of, brand guidelines, for example, or teaching it tone of voice. And then another thing, again, is just kind of having that, I think, kind of human refinement process in place afterwards. But I'd say probably data quality and also fine-tuning a model if you have the budget and the capability to do that. Those are the two things really that are going to make sure that the AI doesn't hallucinate and you do get that contextual output that's very, very valuable to exactly what you need.
Nice. Anything to add?
Yeah, so we kind of joked about it in passing a little bit when we were talking before the session started, in that we're using AI to prompt AI almost a little bit now. So we're kind of using, for example, one of our examples is that we're using ChatGPT to write a brief for Gemini's deep research, for example. And the reason we're doing that is because we can use the LLM in such a way where we can sort of prompt it to give us the research brief in a structured way. And that enables us to then actually fine tune that brief itself first. So again, going off what Beth was saying, it's all about refinement and understanding that what you're putting into the machine is going to give you what you're expecting to gain from it afterwards. And then what that also enables us to do is kind of continuously then check. And we've talked about roles that may exist in the future of companies utilizing AI around things like prompt engineers and stuff like that. Like, we have some incredible people at Peak that are on the cutting edge of AI technology and machine learning and data science and things like that, and having conversations with them around actually how do you properly structure a prompt and things like that, so that you're then enabling the machine, I keep calling it a machine as if it's like Terminator, but you know what I mean, it's kind of like this idea around what you put into it will ultimately ensue what comes out of it in a positive way, and then trying to guard against that hallucination and the way that could potentially work. I guess the other thing for us as well is even on our products, we enable people to set things like guardrails around what it is that they're looking to kind of achieve from the results, and not let the AI just kind of go mental and change all the prices and stuff like that, or to overstock things and stuff. We allow that kind of flexibility in terms of what we're producing for customers. And again, it's all about that control, I think, is understanding like what you can kind of put the leash on the AI for, and how do you then sort of harness that moving forward. So yeah.
Nice. And you mentioned, I suppose, question for Beth is, Lee was mentioning there's specific examples about how you're using it yourself or using it within your team. Have you got any examples as well of how you've been using it internally at Ampliance?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for us in terms of how we've leveraged the actual technology is around audience segmentation. So one thing we found really valuable, because I'm also responsible for the digital strategy within Ampliance, is more around how we kind of create targeted campaigns and messaging based on that different audience segmentation and based on different personas. So to give an example, when we had this kind of product strategy pivot to AI, we essentially had to relook at our TAM. We had to relook at all of our personas. We were addressing a completely new market. And so I think for us, leveraging those analytics in terms of how our consumers, how our prospects were also engaging with us on social media, for example, the locations there, the demographics, collecting all of that data and then leveraging AI to obviously analyze, gave us these different kind of audience segments that we could then target individually. It saved us a lot of money on A/B testing with things like LinkedIn ads, for example, and it really allowed us to kind of drill down into the messaging that would resonate with each of those different segments. So that was a really big use case for us and provided huge amounts of value.
And in terms of internally getting that, say, signed off by stakeholders or working within the company, how did you go about approaching that? Because obviously it's a new way of working and it's probably a bit scary to some people within the company. How do you look in terms of, say, getting that signed off or rolling that out?
Really interestingly, I actually use some of our customers and their success stories to kind of leverage that internally. So a lot of what we're using AI for within kind of my team is exactly how we're kind of going to market and the use cases for our customers. So I leverage some of their success stories to kind of demonstrate the value that it could bring to obviously kind of our own organization. And there was also some work I'd done in a previous role that allowed me to kind of bring those metrics and make them aware of kind of capabilities. That it was met with a lot of skepticism. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it wasn't at all. There are some people in the business that we still need to convince, given the fact that we are an AI content company. However, I think it's like with anything, you will always do A/B testing. You will always kind of test and learn to optimize campaigns, to optimize the messaging. It's no different with AI. You have to go through exactly the same process. So I think there's a business case there in that, yes, it might be new, but we test and learn. If it doesn't work, then we pivot. But in most cases, I think there is value to be found.
Yeah. Nice. And I suppose, is there any considerations as well around risk so like, I can imagine a lot of people, you hear stories like people just say chucking customer data into these larger language models or into systems like that. Like, are there any systems that are safe compared to others that aren't? Like, what's the kind of guidance?
Yes.
Like, you know, how would you approach this, especially someone who's sort of managing a team where people within it might just be going off to one of these language models with your customers' data and just chucking it in, not realizing?
So I have developed like a set of best practices for the organization. So I've kind of run them through. It's around like data privacy and security. So we cannot, or at least people know that they are not supposed to input obviously that customer data. I think from a public perspective, obviously there are a lot of kind of public models that are available. There are publicly available AI tools that people are leveraging. They are probably inputting sensitive data without even realizing. And it's one of our responsibilities as an organization to kind of communicate why that could be dangerous, what the best practices are, how you can kind of avoid that happening, because essentially you are training those models on sensitive information that can then be leveraged elsewhere. There are some really big brands and retailers that have been caught out by this, and it's really, really important to kind of take that into consideration. So when we're leveraging tools internally, there's no sensitive information used. So we'll remove a retailer's name, for example, we'll remove any core metrics, any like identifiable features we have to remove before we can use that tool or platform, just to kind of safeguard ourselves and also to safeguard them as well.
Nice, perfect. All right, Lee, agentic AI, you've been waiting all day for this one. So it's definitely a buzzword, and a lot of people, I think, are quite mystified by it, maybe is the right word. It's kind of like they're hearing a lot about it. They've seen a lot of people post about it on LinkedIn, like, look at this workflow, look, I've got this agent to do this. But can you just explain what it means in practical terms and kind of why we should care, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you'll see agentic. It almost feels like it was 5 minutes ago that we were talking about generative AI, and that's kind of already become old news a little bit in AI spaces. What you'll see is a lot of the big players are already saying that 2025 is a year of agentic, because they often do say things like that. So Sam Altman over at OpenAI, Jensen Huang recently shared a slide at their summit for NVIDIA, showcasing that where AI kind of started in this sort of perceptual AI and being able to sort of like recognize images and sounds and voices, that kind of thing, and how that's then evolved into generative AI, which was kind of the transformation we went through over the last sort of 12 to 18 months in terms of things like ChatGPT and then all of the competitors that came out of the back of that. And now what we're doing is we're moving into this area of agentic, and it's kind of almost what it says on the tin. So it's this idea of agents that kind of work in workflows mixed with generative AI. So what that means is in the current way of generative AI and the way that generative works, you kind of give it a prompt and it goes off and completes that task based on what it knows in its large language model, and then comes back with an answer. What the difference, and you'll see this almost now if you're using ChatGPT and things like that, or Gemini even, it will start to work out what you've asked it first. So you'll give it a prompt, it'll then come back to you saying, I think you're asking me for this. This is what I'm going to do to then solve that problem or give you that answer. And then it'll go off and be able to think about things and basically then come back to you with a better answer. Now, that's kind of the way it is at the moment. And what we're seeing in the future of this agentic workflow of things at the moment is that it will then be able to sort of go back to itself and correct things. They'll have memory, they'll have tools that they can use, and you can give prompts to things and then they can go off to do a task, come back, use its own generative model to then refine the task. Maybe it needs to think, I need to go and work with another agent to figure an answer out and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what we're building at Peak with our Co-Driver product. There's a webinar on it tomorrow, just a little plug there. But ultimately, what we're seeing is this evolution towards how automation in marketing and therefore the use of these agentic workflows that we're kind of building as well ourselves is almost changing the future in a way of AI and automation, the way that it's going to work together, because it adds this powerful level of being able to understand the steps of a certain workflow you've given it and then generate ideas, thoughts, and go back off and do something else and come back to you again. So it's almost like an advancement from the current one-step generative way to a multi-step agentic way of doing things.
Are you able to share any kind of workflows you have at the moment, or what you're kind of using it for as well specifically?
100%, yeah. So one of the biggest challenges we had is we changed our go-to-market model quite drastically back in September, October last year. And what that meant is that we kind of had to reduce our team, unfortunately, as a business. So our sales development representatives, etc., we don't have any of those anymore. And what the issue was that we were finding is because we were generating so many good leads, just saying, we almost were generating too many for the existing salespeople that were left, because our processes hadn't changed. When we had a bigger team, we needed to then work out, well, actually, how are we then going to improve this workflow so that we're taking a lot of the work away from the existing sales executives to understand how do we continue the level of conversion from lead to MQL to SQL to opportunity, etc. So what I've built is, and this is utilizing Zapier, and it's such a shame because I think Zapier are going down this agentic workflow route as well. I've actually got a meeting with the head of product at Zapier tonight, which would have been nice if it was before this meeting, and I would have been able to tell everyone what he'd said. So I'm sorry about that, but yeah, I'm going to basically try and get out of them that that's what they're going to do in terms of building this agentic way of Zapier working. So for those of you that don't know, by the way, Zapier is a tool that you can build automations in, and you can plug in loads of different things. So for example, a really simple one is that we have it running for our LinkedIn ads, and when a form is filled in on LinkedIn, it adds it to Salesforce, and then it sends a message to Slack, and you can do these kind of workflows with it. So what we've done now is we've almost taken that particular workflow a little bit of a step further, in that it now almost takes away the SDR's research phase. So when a lead comes in at the top of that sort of particular cycle, I've then built custom APIs into Google's search. So it will then, using a generative AI prompt, generate that search term, send that to Google's search API, pull back the results, but then it uses the generative AI again to then sort of flesh out those results, categorize them, understand, like put them basically make sense, and pull out the parts that are relevant. Then it goes down, it works out based on the particular industry that the lead is. It then goes off and does another Google search, and it sort of goes down this little workflow. Now what I'm kind of adding to the end of it is actually pulling in things like our sales playbooks based on what the particular industry is, or the size, or the job title, etc., and then getting it to look at a load of data based on our particularly good performing salesperson cold emails or cold in-mails, and actually utilize all of the research it's done itself to write the cold outreach email and write the in-mail for the salesperson who it would go to. What we've not done yet, and this is about protecting ourselves in terms of making sure that it's right and works properly, is automate the sending of those things. We can do it. We can connect it up to Salesforce, so we can connect it into Gmail, which is our email platform that we use, to send the email as well. So it's almost like a no touch from the SDR, from the sales executive, and it almost replicates an SDR's way of working. It'll also send the LinkedIn email and stuff as well. We could also then put it into Salesloft, for example, or we could put it into a workflow within Salesforce, for example, or a Nurture, that kind of thing. We're constantly building out these ideas, and we're on about iteration 10 at the moment of what I've built, because when you start going through it, you start then thinking, oh, do you know what would be good, or do you know what would be cool, like the kind of thing. And we showcased it to the rest of the company in one of our stand-ups, and the best thing about those particular sessions and doing that is showing people the art of what's possible, and then the amount of people that come to you and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it's an amazing situation to be in, because things constantly evolve over time. And so that's one of the examples of what we're trying to do with what we think is replicating like an agentic workflow. I mean, it's not pure agentic at the moment because the agents don't work independently, but it's an idea of how it will go. There's another tool called N8N, I think it is, where we are actually building an agentic workflow for one of our customers at the moment, because they've seen our work on agentic workflows and agentic use cases, and we're really impressed with it. So we're building that for them. I can't really say what it is. And then there's Co-Driver, which is our agentic product. It's basically started out as generative AI and like a chatbot within our platform, where you can ask it questions about the data and what it's doing, and overstock locations and markdown prices, all that kind of stuff. But what will enable it to do in the future is be able to go off and ask other parts of our software for information, collate it, come back to it, and then you can also in the future be able to send it off to actually do those tasks for you as well. So that's where we see it going.
Amazing, perfect. And Beth, moving on from agentic and just talking about AI in general, and even kind of relating it back to that initiative or the rolling out of that program that you had before, how these tools like promise a lot of efficiency. So how are you actually measuring the impact or the ROI? And is there anything like, obviously at the end of the day, like kind of the end result of the campaign where you're A/B testing it, great, but like, are there any other metrics or KPIs people should be looking out for when using these AI tools just to see if they are improving efficiencies?
I think a lot of it comes down to speed and also time to market. So one of the things that obviously we found is using AI to kind of take away repetitive tasks. For example, within a marketing team, it could be the production of alt text for images. So we're ensuring that we're compliant with accessibility guidelines. It could be campaign taglines. We are then freeing up resource and time on the team to be able to focus on more strategic tasks. So in terms of productivity, we've seen huge gains. And I think that's something that companies and businesses should really look out for is how quickly can you get that content out to market compared to if everything was done manually, for example. And also, two, are you able to get more done? Does your team now have more capacity because you're giving AI like those more repetitive tasks? So I think speed is definitely key for us. Engagement, I think, is one based on kind of the AI's ability to support with A/B testing. And another thing that I think is really key is cost saving. And that could be, you might be a bit light on resource on your team and you're thinking about hiring somebody else. But actually, if you are using AI for those kind of very manual tasks, those very repetitive tasks, and your team have more time to focus on strategy, it might be that you don't need that additional head. And that's something that we found as well. There actually is a lot of work that AI can support with when previously we'd be looking for kind of human resource. Now, we have to be very strategic about that. I'm not saying, kind of hand off AI to kind of a sole role's responsibilities. But I do think it's really key in understanding how it can improve productivity on the team, and also, the time and also the cost savings within that. So those are kind of some key things I would note down, especially when it comes to kind of presenting a business case to senior leadership, and two, kind of actually measuring the quality and the output of what the AI is producing and how it's supporting.
Perfect. And is there any tips or recommendations for people, say, within a team that might be not pessimistic, but a bit not wanting to adopt the tools or not wanting to go down that? They're a bit kind of, Luddite, I suppose, in a way, like not wanting to kind of use these tools. Is there any kind of tips or recommendations on that?
Well, I will sit here and be very honest. I was also a skeptic once. I think obviously because I've spent so many years of my career producing content and building kind of SEO strategies and refining content for search. So I think for me, plugging it into an AI tool and getting like a very generic output, I've had team members that have sent me AI generated content, and I can tell instantly there is no human emotion. There's no kind of nuance in terms of market considerations, in terms of regional considerations. It could be cultural. It reads flat. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to then optimize that before it's actually ready to go to market. So I was very much a skeptic. Yeah. But that's what I mean when I say, when we think about particular use cases and particular ROI, it's about how can we integrate that where it can add most value. I think a lot of businesses they want to jump on the bandwagon. They want to adopt all of the publicly available AI tools and kind of onboard them into the business. They're never going to be able to realize value that way. So I think the way to approach it is picking high priority use cases one at a time, testing and learning. And then if we get the results based on the targets we've set ourselves for that particular output, then I think we know that AI can provide value in that particular instance. But it's being very selective about where you adopt AI and into which workflows.
Perfect. Cool. Lee, and in terms of I suppose the element that you Beth mentioned there as well, was that almost that creativity side of things, like is this a void of any human emotion, or there's kind of missing those aspects? Like, how do you see AI handling, say, creativity and those creative tasks? Is it a case of like, it's a bit, poor at the moment, but it's going to get better, or do you think it will never be able to replace that human creativity?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think when it comes down to it, I don't think that AI in a generative sense will be able to ever replicate the strategic thinking and the creativity of people. And the reason is because it's built and it learns based off people in the past. In essence, it's based on things that have been told to it over a certain amount of time. It learns off these large models, etc., and large data sets, which will ultimately all come from people. And one of the issues that we think may happen in the future is that AIs will be continuously learning, but then as they learn on more and more AI generated content, is it going to sort of create this downward not spiral, but a downward trend in terms of the efficacy and the value of that content, because it's just learning off its own regurgitation over time? But the more and more people use generated content, that's not generated in a way that's considerate of kind of like nuance and creativity and that kind of thing. So I think that the way that we should be looking at it is that we need to be using generative AI as the enabler for us to be more creative. I think as the people here will have seen the same quote as me, but you kind of want AI to do your dishes and your laundry so we can be creative rather than the AI being creative so that I have to do more dishes and laundry. Do you know what I mean? And it's this idea around we want to utilize it as a tool, as an enabler to make us more creative and give us more time to do the strategic thinking and give us more time to do the analytical data inside of things and like sort of understanding how we improve our own processes and our own creative aspects of what we're doing. Because ultimately, if you're just kind of sitting there at a desk every day, plugging everything that you know into AI to go off and do it, then it's not fulfilling for us either for it to be like that. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Anything to add to that about the creativity side of things? And do you feel like AI will ever be able to kind of get to that point?
There is one particular use case. It was one of our customers actually, who's they're a global fashion brand, and they wanted to create. There was like a product imagery. It was like a black, like long lace ball gown, and they wanted to be able to personalize that content based on which country a user entered the website from. So they used AI to generate a variety of backgrounds. There was like a New York background. It was like in front of like a Brooklyn restaurant. There was like a palatial steps image in Venice for like users that were from Italy. But the idea was they were trying to create this localization that made the content a little bit more relevant to each of those users. Now, I've seen a lot of AI generated images. A lot of them are pretty terrible. This was actually really, really impressive. It didn't look like a green screen. It didn't look kind of transposed. It was very, very professional. And that was just them just testing to see if that would kind of resonate better with their audiences. Because as we know, I think that localization of content, whether it's written or whether it is visual, you cannot convert and you cannot make sure that message lands with your audience unless the content actually resonates. So localization is really, really key. So that's one instance where I've seen it done very well. I think in terms of large scale production, things like video for me, I haven't actually seen anything that AI has produced that I think can rival human creativity and human production. But I do think for brands and retailers, for example, kind of campaign imagery or product imagery, in terms of speed and agility, it can have huge benefits. Even just by changing the background or changing a promotional image, it allows them to move a lot faster, react to customer demand, react to market demand, for example. But I don't think we're quite there yet with kind of large scale production.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds, yeah, because I suppose, did they have the professionally shot image of the ball gown kind of first?
Yes,
you know, and
it was the same model.
And then working through it. Yeah, because I suppose that's, again, it's a good way of using it. It's not like replacing the whole process. It's kind of using what you have to, rather than say, back in the day, you're going to shoot in every single location or get a stock image and then manually Photoshop that into everything in the background. So perfect. All right. We'll do some audience questions in a second as well. Final two questions from me was, if you had to place a bet, what's the next major shift in AI and automation? Lee, you can also mention agentic AI as well if you would like, in the next 12 to 24 months, and that's for both of you. Yeah.
First.
Sure. Yeah. I would probably bet on agentic AI. Look, I think that the way things are going.
I realised that was going to be
no, it's all right. I did that on purpose. It's fine.
We can do that again.
No, I think that ultimately, when you want to look at how we want to utilize AI moving forward, is to kind of see it as a tool. Like Excel changed kind of like bookkeeping and stuff originally, and Microsoft Office and all those kinds of softwares. I think AI will do the same thing for lots of different industries in lots of different ways. I think if you treat AI as creating not the end product, but helping you to get to the end product of something, I think is also a really important way of doing things. And then when you look at agentic again, like kind of as we mentioned earlier, I think it's really then important to understand, well, how can you then work with these agents that will be able to sit and have their own specialisms? I think I really saw a really nice quote. It may have been from Jensen Huang again from NVIDIA. The idea that the IT departments of the future will be the HR departments of agents, which I think is a really interesting way of looking at it, in that they'll have these people in IT that will actually be looking after these agents that will be able to, I don't know, you have internally like a HR bot or a finance bot or something like that, and they will be able to like be this analyst that sits next to you every single day that you can ask questions of. Like we're building Co-Driver so that it's an interface where you can literally just ask it questions and give you answers to things, and it will go off and do that information and bring it back what you're looking for, create charts and graphs and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that would be mine, I think.
Nice. The HR bot sounds pretty scary. I can't wait to chat about my bereavement with the HR bot and get nothing back. But yeah, Beth, if you had to place a bet next 12 to 24 months.
I think one of the key things is going to be like hyper-personalization. So obviously we know at the moment, I think consumers are expecting personalized experiences more and more frequently, and that's in any kind of buying journey. I think there's actually a quote from Salesforce. They ran a report a couple of years ago, and it's something like 66% of consumers will bounce off a website or bounce off a landing page if they're not receiving an experience tailored to their individual preferences and based on their past shopping behavior. That's a huge statistic. So I think what AI is able to do now is personalize that content for every audience, no matter where they are. So that's not just like omnichannel across digital channels, websites, apps, mobile. But I think it's also understanding how that content can be relevant to them. So the example of this fashion retailer, for example, that was based on regional, that was based on location. And there were also things like personalized product recommendations and being served different content based on the weather, for example. So I think hyper-personalization will become an integral part of the way that businesses go to market. I think that's probably my number one. I think the second thing, specifically for kind of marketing teams is more around AI content generation and the use of AI in kind of maximizing efficiency in workflows, as you've kind of spoken about, Lee. I think that will become an integral part of a marketing strategy, not just like a nice to have, but I think it will become a must to have in order for businesses to have a competitive advantage.
Perfect. Nice. All right. I'd normally waffle on for another 20 minutes asking questions, but we've got a lot of people in the audience from a lot of different backgrounds. So yeah, happy to any questions from the audience if there are any. This week there'll be none, won't. Any questions? Yes.
This is great. Thank you for this. I've kind of got a question around selling this to clients in terms of kind of where you find the balance between time and charges by time versus value, and like how you can package it up and sell it to clients, and getting that balance right between, yes, it's a cost save, it could be a cost saving thing, but also it's a value to that client too, and as an agency, how you kind of sell that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I worked for an agency in the past, so I kind of know where you're coming from, and it was just at the start of AI becoming big, if that makes sense. And I remember using ChatGPT before it was ChatGPT, if that makes sense. So it was like OpenAI's sort of like interface that you had a big box in it, and you just literally wrote your prompt in, and then it gave you a response. It wasn't like this chat thing. And we were using that to almost in the early days of this idea around generating workflows or generating SEO strategy ideas and keyword lists and that kind of stuff. Now, one thing that we came up against was, well, we charge by hour based on the people working on the project. But actually, if we can save ourselves time, then it means that we're delivering the same thing, but it's taking us less time. Therefore, the profitability of an account was better, which is kind of what you're getting at. In terms of selling that to a client, I think that will come down largely to your relationships with the clients individually, because if it's a new customer, a new client, for example, they're probably expecting to understand, like, right, what are you doing in an itemized way every month, and what hours are you spending, and who is it that's spending those hours? And even from my perspective, on sitting on this side of the fence again, that's what I want to know from the agencies that we use, for example. But then I'm not drilling down, and this is just me speaking personally, I'm not then drilling down, actually, are you spending every single one of those hours every month? Because from me and my perspective, all I care about is what the end result numbers are as a head of digital, looking at figures from PPC and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So I guess it almost comes down to selling the advantages of what your outputs are, and your proof in the pudding is kind of thing of this, well, we've done it and we've delivered it and these are the results, and trusting or getting them to trust you almost. I'm not saying that they don't, but what I mean is this, like, is allowing them to come on that journey with you of learning as well around AI, and maybe even offering them insights and being transparent. We're utilizing this tool. If they then start the conversations around, well, actually, you're not spending as much time on it anymore, then I don't think those conversations will actually happen because they'll be seeing the results anyway, so that they'll be kind of happy. I mean, look, from my side of the fence, we're always trying to look at how we can cut costs down and things like that and everything. So there may be annoying people like me that know that kind of thing and want to ask those things. But yeah, it's all about individual relationship building rather than a blanket approach, I would surmise. So yeah, I don't know if that was helpful. But
Yeah, I think it's just, I guess it's different cost and structure like a little bit. So you can't really package it up because this is the price and the cost for that.
The only other thing I'd say is the time might be slightly different because obviously you've got the support of AI technology, but the expertise within your team is going to grow because it's your team that understands how to get the output from AI that you need in order to deliver for your clients, and also how to use it to maximize efficiency. So I think there's an additional skill set that your team is going to acquire that still means that value is there for how you're packaging the products, which I think is a really, really key thing. So it might not be time, but it's expertise and skill, and it's knowledge of how to utilize the technology. So I think that's potentially how you kind of communicate that and how you package it up slightly differently.
Yeah, and I think from the agency side, I suppose as well, like Ian, at the moment, we've not changed anything in terms of like, as you were saying, like, okay, well, we've saved time now, we're going to cut the cost and then pass it on to the client. I can see that in the future being a massive thing because it's like, well, agency over there who were the same prices as before, and now we're both using AI tools and they're doing less time, but they can knock off the cost. Suddenly it starts to become a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of like, in terms of the cost. So yeah, we've not kind of thought about changing anything at the moment, but it's definitely on the mind in terms of like when, you see, and especially on LinkedIn, you see a lot of people where they're like creating these agentic tools to kind of be like a one-man band agency who can kind of do a lot of the stuff, especially around, say, SEO, whereas a lot of stuff before it was manually crawling sites and finding the issues and stuff. So yeah, I do see it being a big change, but at the moment, yeah, we've not kind of done anything yet about it. So yeah. Yes.
Yeah, hi, it's a beautiful conversation, really got all of you. My name is Diane, I'm from an automation background. And Beth, you said something that really resonated, struck a lot of emotions. You said AI will always need humans in the loop and to interact with these solutions. And that, I was like, oh, that really reassured me. I'm like, okay, then we're safe. But at the same time, that's also where I see the biggest bottleneck with AI from an automation perspective, but there is always a human need in there. Just wanted to pick both your brains on that is how you see that going. Do you not see AI coming to a point where it is able to really exponentially be as good or better as we are? And is there not value to leave it and automate things so we can do more things, so we can, for example, still keep the creative stuff, but is there not a value in being able to send email back and forth to do sort of more editing tasks, but be able to use AI and just let it run its course? And I feel like we're not there yet to do that, but what's your thoughts on the future of that?
It's a great question. I think, we are, I think you briefly touched on it earlier, but we are actually leveraging AI and automation in our kind of nurture workflows. So post kind of events and post conferences, for example, we build these nurture workflows for these leads, and we're sending them content, we're sending them emails. That whole process is automated. So we oversee it obviously from an analytical perspective because we're regularly looking at the engagement and kind of testing and learning as we go. But that entire process from beginning to end, there's human oversight. There isn't much refinement that goes into that unless we don't see an open rate we want, or, we're not having those conversations with those warm leads that we want to be. But I think there are certainly elements that you can fully automate. I don't feel confident at this stage there's going to be complete automation without human oversight. I don't know how you feel, but I think at this stage, human oversight and refinement will always be needed. And I think that comes more from, as I mentioned, like an emotional perspective. It doesn't matter how much you can fine tune an LLM or, a particular model that you're using. It's still not going to be able to kind of build in that human emotion and that kind of connection with any audience that you're speaking to or any consumer that you're looking to convert is absolutely key. So I think we have to be quite selective with where we choose to leverage automation, and then where we choose to kind of use AI for enhanced output or creativity, for example. But I certainly don't think we're there yet that we could just leave the technology alone to do its thing.
Thank you. I can't agree enough. I think that when it comes down to it, like I mentioned earlier, with our automating workflows that we're running, we're not quite ready yet to just sort of let it go on its own and send emails to people automatically and send LinkedIn requests automatically, because it's not just about the lack of trust about whether the generative AI will get it right in terms of the message that it's writing, but it's almost our want to keep an eye on things just from a performance perspective as well. And if we kind of let it go off on its own, then we're kind of we're almost kept out of the loop a little bit of the machine doing it kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And we don't want to lose that control. I think that we need to understand that it's there as a tool for us to make us sort of more productive, more efficient, but also to have and contain and retain that control, if that makes sense, as people. Because otherwise, if you're letting it go off and do what it wants almost, you kind of then, and this is kind of why when it comes down to things like AI that's built into, I don't know, Google ads and things like that, or LinkedIn ads and the algorithms that they're using. And I almost feel a little bit wary of the lack of transparency into a lot of how that works because, sorry about that. But because at the end of the day, I want to retain an element of control over things. So while we will get there, there was probably a time a long time ago now, but where we wouldn't even allow emails to be sent automatically through a nurture campaign or something, for example. And now it's just second nature to us. We probably will get there with some aspects of AI, but I don't think it'll ever be kind of like an entire marketing team run by AI and that's it. And yeah, there's just someone like checking the lights are still on every so often. So yeah,
that's my dream gone. They're the team. Yes.
Yeah, just to expand on that actually. So I know you spoke about some AI that you're using at the minute. What are your plans for your team going forward this year? Are there any areas? And I guess like how do you identify where it's best to spend your time in terms of automations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me personally, a really key piece will be like localization. So we have global customers and we operate in lots of different markets through events and conferences, but we don't have content available in all of those different markets, which our sales team have found really difficult to have those conversations when they don't have a case study, for example, in German or a white paper in, Russian. Like it's really, really difficult for us. So I think one thing for me is I want to leverage AI to be able to localize that content at speed and at the volume that we need to. But I'm also very, very conscious that I'm going to need to sense check that with a third party or with somebody internally who speaks the language. So there are a couple of steps in that process. But that's one thing that I think certainly for a business at the moment will be hugely valuable. I know it's a need and we just haven't got the capacity to do that. It's very, very expensive to get content localized. And I think leveraging AI technology to support with that will be something that really, really benefits us.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, what we're looking at is ultimately understanding all of the manual processes that are repetitive over time and understanding where they can be automated in certain ways, or we use generative AI to do certain things. So last week, for example, in one of our company stand-ups, we had one of our product managers. Is that right? Product manager, Josh? Liz works with me, by the way. That's why I'm not at it. But yeah, so ultimately, what they did is they showcased to us an almost like a mini agentic workflow that they'd created that helps them to build in questions and expected questions based on data sets for our co-driver product. So what they were doing is they realized that they were having to write out all this code basically that would ultimately find the data that was needed for a particular set of questions that somebody might ask co-driver in the software. And then they would have to go through and sort of recheck it all, make sure it all made sense, make sure the code worked, that kind of stuff. And then they realized that they were spending far too much time on that side of things. They thought, well, we could just automate that, or we could just use generative AI to actually generate that. And then it did. And then they were sort of then messing around with that data. And then they realized again, they were doing a load more sort of repetitive manual tasks that they could then automate. So I guess to answer your original question about where we see the future of the teams moving forward and implementing sort of AI and automation within that, it's finding the areas first, I think, where you're spending lots of time that are sort of like sinking all of your time essentially and taking your time away from being able to do the strategic and analytical and data-driven things that you want to do, well, you have to do, because I think that that's where you can utilize AI in the best way possible, I think. So, yeah, don't know, that's a question.
Yeah, broad question. Quite a lot of the examples you've both given are about automating creatively tedious tasks. So you can do either things that are practical, but faster than are practical, or just not have to have the creative misery of doing them. Or either be going in directions of AI enabling tasks that were previously impossible that have now become possible.
That's a great question.
Question.
Yeah. I think it's going, in the sense of impossible, it's going back to my agentic workflow idea that I gave earlier in terms of it's like not replacing, but doing the work of an SDR. So it, in a sense, was impossible for us to do that because we didn't have the people there to do that. What it's enabling us to do is actually then continue something that would have been impossible because we don't have the people there anymore to still give the same information, the same lead information and research and follow up and all that kind of thing, to almost like fill in that gap that had been created, if that makes sense. It might be a bit of a cop-out answer, to be honest. But do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what's most important.
Yeah, I would say it was previously impossible to personalize in the way that we are now personalizing content, because personalization for different personas and different audience segments requires a huge volume of content. Therefore, you need a lot of resource on your team. You need to have a lot of capacity in order to be able to produce that. And I think AI is, one, helpful in actually defining that audience segmentation, and two, enabling you to produce the volumes of content at speed that are needed in order to deliver those personalized experiences. So I think for us, yeah, personalization, I think personalization is still impossible for a lot of brands, a lot of companies. And I do think it's AI technology that can get you that little step further. Because after all, that is exactly what consumers are expecting in today's landscape.
I have another bit to add about scale. I've just thought of something there. So again, it's creative license with the term of impossible. But I think that buy-in and getting people to do things for you and come on a journey with you has been made much easier by our utilization of generative AI and other AI automation. For example, although there will be a lot of people in the room that will resonate with this, but getting people to share your company content on LinkedIn feels like pulling teeth sometimes. And what we've done now is we've built an automation that will take when a blog is posted on WordPress, which is our website CMS, and this uses Zapier to work. So then the trigger is that the blog's posted, it then writes a summary of what the blog is, and then it sort of sends that to another generative AI part, which then takes my posts over time, for example, and gives it my writing style. It takes Liz's post, it takes some of our COO's posts, and then personalizes a LinkedIn post for me to post automatically onto my LinkedIn. So if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll notice them because they do stand out. But what it does do is I don't even think about it. I just start getting like a few likes and stuff like that. I think, oh, a blog must have been posted, kind of thing. And it works really well. And it just means that anybody that in the company that was like, we really want them to share things because they've got loads of influence and loads of followers and etc., where previously they just couldn't be bothered. Let's face it, that's why people don't do it. But it takes that away from it, and it means that you get that automatic buy-in, because I can say, there's stuff we keep asking you to do over and over again every single week. I can make that go away and it'll just do it for you if you want. And that's probably, again, it's not impossibility that people would do it. Well, it feels impossible to get people to do it sometimes. So I guess, that's kind of another example of what we're doing with that.
So brilliant example. I could learn. And it could.
Yep.
From a higher, when you bring in the people in, obviously with AI, we still relatively new in a lot of sense of that, with this label, I guess. It's kind of been around in bits here and there for a while. I mean, I know a misconception, like every new student now knows how to use AI, which isn't the case, because like exactly, I just throw stuff in there and, it gives them like, there's a lot of issues at universities, plagiarism now, because of what characteristics are you looking for in a person who's coming into your companies who, let's say, they can use AI? How are they like proving that to you in a way so that you trust it? Are they coming in fresh and you're teaching them, or are you looking for maybe example or certain skills when bringing them in so you don't have to?
It's a great question. I have a new starter on my team who's joining next month. And one of the things that I was asking her in the interview process is, what is her experience with AI tools and technology? How does she leverage that within kind of her own workflows and her own responsibilities? And what I asked her to do at task stage is demonstrate the tools that she'd used and write kind of step-by-step the process she'd used, how she'd optimized, how she'd refined. I was checking also for her understanding of best practices and how we kind of make sure that output is also relevant to us. But I really wanted to understand how she was using the tools, and she was very forthcoming. She was also thankfully very knowledgeable. Well, she got the job, so she was very knowledgeable. But it was interesting that became a core part of the process. So I needed her to demonstrate an understanding of how these tools worked, how they could improve her own efficiency on an individual basis, how they could be valuable to the company. Were there any new tools and technology that she was aware of that we previously weren't using? And then also, what was her understanding of how to leverage that output to make it really valuable and to make it contextually relevant? So that became a core part of the interview process. So I think it's an awareness. It's an understanding, and it's also practical experience. I think you need hands-on experience of these tools to understand, how you can get the most out of them.
I've not hired anyone since I've been at Peak, so this is almost like an answer that something I would look for rather than something I have looked for. But from my perspective, I like people's honesty around using AI tools, because I think that there's almost a little bit of it feels a little bit taboo sometimes to just admit, I did that with AI or something. And do you know what I mean? So I've written things where it's a structure for a new PPC set of keywords or a campaign group, etc. I'm building. And I'll openly say, like, I've used AI to write this, so to help me write it, or to put the structure together. I did the same for an agency brief and things like that. I told it what I wanted. And I don't mind people being like honest about it, because everyone does it. You know what I mean? So I think the honesty side of things to utilize and how they utilize it is important, because I feel like you need to be in an environment where everyone's open and honest and has the psychological safety to be open and honest about those things with each other. It sounds like I'm not talking about generative AI here. It's something completely different. But the other side of things is almost, again, touching on what Beth was talking about in terms of, are they using it in the right way, best practices around things, understanding which models work best in which situations. So for us, we're kind of in a little bit of a quandary at the moment at Peak in terms of what technology do we even buy to use from a generative AI perspective, because it's such in the infancy at the moment of, I say infancy, it's in a period at the moment where models are just being released left, right and center. Like ChatGPT will have a new one next week, and then you get DeepSeek that pops up out of nowhere, and then you've got Gemini, and you've got Claude, and you've got all these different models that are changing all of the time. So we're kind of a bit like, well, which one do we commit to as a company to buy for our staff to use when they'll overtake each other consistently and continuously? So understanding the person in terms of them being able to realize that as well, and actually utilize the AI platforms from a generative perspective in the best way, I think is also a precursor to understanding that they know more about it than it can just write a blog for me, that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that as well is, like, one of the hardest roles that we've had to hire for, I have no development experience. Like, so hiring a developer was always a tough role to hire. You know, they're chatting, all this stuff, showing you some things, talking through things, you don't know what they're doing. So the thing that I found the easiest at the start was, I knew freelancers from my previous roles or people, so I just paid them for an hour to join the call and grill that person during that interview as well from that point, just to make sure the technical test we set for them, they're talking through it, it makes sense. So I suppose if you have no AI experience and you're looking to hire someone who's coming in for something like an AI specific role, so that could be something that could help as well in terms of just getting that second opinion and not having kind of the ball pulled over your eyes, I suppose. So, yes.
When it comes to utilizing AI in like content marketing, I feel like there can be a little bit to be on the client's part, where like certain clients can be sort of like apprehensive or unconvinced about its like value as an extension of like a human agency. So I just wondered like how you would approach that with clients, or like how you would introduce AI integration to a client who might need a little bit more reassurance.
I think what I'd probably start with doing is outlining the steps that we took to get that kind of finished piece of content, right? So are we leveraging AI for formatting, for example? Say it was a piece of blog content or like a longer form piece of written content. You might ask AI for suggested subheadings. I think it's outlining what you're using it for, because you can't, as you know, just type a brief into an AI tool, get a piece of content and then publish it. It's not going to be SEO optimized, and it's not going to have the brand's tone of voice. So I think it's just for them outlining the steps and helping them to understand how it integrates into your process, because the finished product is going to be as valuable whether you use AI or not. But I think for you, it's just speeding up that content production process itself, actually making sure that from the process of like ideation to publication, that time is much, much shorter using AI technology. And I think helping the client to understand that will help them realize that actually the value of the output doesn't actually change. It may even become enhanced with creative suggestions by AI, but just be very, very transparent about how you're using it and at which stage of the process.
Cool. We're going rapid fire on the questions now, just because we've got a couple. There was one. Yes, go for it.
I would like to understand something. Like, you do content marketing in general, social media posts. My question is, when you post something, basically you're touching the feeling side of, so, to be whatever it could be, to be witty, to be funny, to be so many things. How do you translate? What kind of parameters, what kind of logic do you follow to let the AI bring that the emotional value that we have as humans in a logical set? Like, what parameters? What, like?
Yeah.
So I think the example I gave earlier on the LinkedIn automated poster thing that I gave is a good one, because what we do with that is we ask, as part of the prompt, we kind of give a really clear instruction, like, this is what we're asking you to do, or this is what we're expecting from you. And then you kind of give it, here's an example of the kind of thing that I want you to create and generate for me. And then the context part is kind of at the end then. And what I mean by the context in this particular case is, here's 10 of this user's previous posts. So understand their style of writing, understand what they're doing and saying and how they like to be. And if they're hilarious, that's what I put in mine anyway, then it means that you can then generate it. So you can get it to generate something that's actually quite close to what you do. The other important thing with that is, and I was talking to one of our product managers about this the other day, is that feedback loop for the generative AI as well. So sometimes what you can do is you can build in as part of an automation to spit out or to push out the content that's written by the AI into a spreadsheet, and then you can over time sort of amalgamate that spreadsheet and give it back to it as its feedback, and to say, this is what you've been producing, tweak this, change this, do this, and use that as part of the contextual stuff. So yeah, it's all about that continuous improvement, I guess, from my perspective, and then also ensuring you're getting the prompts absolutely spot on and using context importantly. So
nice. All right, perfect. Well, yeah, that is all the time for questions. But yeah, Beth and Lee will be around after to grill them for a little bit as well before shooting off. So is there anywhere where it's best to follow you? Or I know you've got your webinar that you plug tomorrow. So is there anything else you guys, is it best to just follow you on LinkedIn and stay up to date there? Cool. Perfect. All good. Amazing. So yeah, thank you very much all for coming. In the future, if you signed up for a meetup or for Eventbrite, you'll get the kind of post-event email on that about the next one. Or if you just head over to the website, you can sign up to the newsletter on there. I won't bombard you with loads of rubbish. It will only be about the event. So you won't get any crap in your inbox. But yeah, really appreciate you all for coming along. Thanks a lot for the questions. Some great questions. Really appreciate those. And yeah, we'll let you know about the next event. Thank you.